The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jamison Rabbit, and this week I'm so excited to be joined by a special first-time guest. We've been trying to get him on the show for a while, but I'm so happy to introduce you to Jackson Nesbit. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Jamison. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here, man. We've been trying to get you in here and schedule it up, and finally have you here during summer break. Pretty excited for this.
Yeah, so am I.
Let's go ahead and get started. We're here to talk about a bunch of movies. We got three films plus a throwback segment this week. So I'm going to get us started with what we have on the marquee this week. Of course, the big movie at the box office right now is Thor: Love and Thunder, the fourth standalone Thor film. This one, again, directed by Taika Waititi, who directed Ragnarok, the previous one. Of course, we bring back Chris Hemsworth as the titular Thor. After spanning the galaxy, fighting battles with his guardian friends, Thor is alerted that there is a new villain by the name of Gore, who is played by Christian Bale. And Gore has been out slaying gods all over the place, and he now has his eye on the land of New Asgard, led by King Valkyrie, of course played by Tessa Thompson. And this leads Thor, along with his trusty axe, Stormbreaker, to head off to face the God Killer. Meanwhile, his former flame, Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, returns to the franchise. And she is suffering from stage 4 cancer. And she's traveling herself to New Asgard in hopes that Mjolnir, Thor's fractured hammer, can somehow heal her, using its powers to heal her. And she discovers that it does. It imbues her with the powers of Thor, or in her case, the mighty Thor she goes by. However, it's not curing her cancer, and in fact, it might be accelerating the cancer for her. So we get this kind of meeting of the team of Thor and Jane, Valkyrie, of course, Thor's buddy Korg, voiced by Taika Waititi, hoping to find a way to stop Gore. And one side of this film is kind of your standard superhero journey as the team travels the realms, searching for help, trying to find someone to join the team, alerting others that the God Killer is coming, and preparing to face off with Gore. But for me, the more interesting part of the movie is kind of the awkward reunion between Thor and Jane. They had a breakup, though we see Thor has kind of never gotten over, of course. And I also really liked the odd relationship drama, the jealousy between Thor and Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, who he wishes he still had, kind of awkward stuff. But I kind of like the relationship drama in this movie. Curious, sir, what did you think of Thor? Did you have high expectations coming in?
I actually did. Thor, to me, has always been an interesting franchise in the MCU, with the first films kind of being meh to most people, including myself. But Thor Ragnarok kind of took the MCU off its feet, scraped it out of the gutter. Taika Waititi came in and made a really comedic superhero film, totally tonally different, but I thought it worked fantastic, and I thought that movie was great. Just showed that he's a really versatile director who can, just form really any property and make it super entertaining. This one, I didn't think it was quite as good as Thor Ragnarok, personally. There was a lot of good here. I also really enjoyed the relationship between Jane and Thor, that whole kind of montage of their previous relationship. Yeah. There was a lot of good jokes in there. There was definitely some stuff that I wasn't quite fond of. Some new characters and settings weren't introduced properly, in my opinion. And the final battle felt a little kind of weak and definitely rushed as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I felt like the tone was kind of all over the place in this movie. Because Taika Waititi is great at delivering great comedy, his own brand of comedy. And he's always been able to deal with trauma in a lighthearted way. And he's just got his own style, which I absolutely love. And Ragnarok is like the high point of that, and how he was able to make Thor, which I thought was like a really just boring, serious character in those first two films, give him personality, play on Chris Hemsworth's comedic chops, you know. And this movie, like, you get moments of that are great, like, oh, great comedy, but then he's like ping-ponging between ultra serious, dark stuff with gore. And it didn't always work for me.
Yeah, for what Taika Waititi has done in the past, this definitely just felt like kind of like a weaker outing for him. He's actually one of my favorite directors working today, and I would totally agree that he has an excellent sense of kind of keeping like a serious and I guess trauma-filled story, like you said, with bits of comedy. But this one was almost a little too silly, in my opinion. I think some of his like greater films, like Jojo Rabbit, definitely amplify this as well. But for this one, it just kind of felt like a little weak for him. And I don't know if this is also like kind of partially Disney's fault or something about like how the production was rushed. But for him, it was just definitely not his best outing.
It's also tough for me, as much as I love Taika, when you continually go back to the comedic character of Korg, which is voiced by Taika, and like keep giving him all these one-liners. And I'm like, you know, you're the director. It felt self-serving to me as much as I enjoy him. But like, I'm gonna give my character all these great bits. But I liked Christian Bale as Gore. I like that we got. My big complaint with Marvel movies is too often, outside of the Thanos character, too often in these movies the villains don't feel enough to me. Ronin, the previous villains, they're not introduced enough and they're just dispatched and like, okay, unless we're building to like the Thanos character. And I thought that at least Gore had somewhat of an arc and a motivation that we see. I mean, the movie opens with him as opposed to opening with Thor. So I kind of appreciated that it was at least a villain who I felt I understood somewhat as opposed to some of the other villains they've thrown at us.
I would absolutely agree. I think that both of the recent Thor movies directed by Taika, including the character of Hela from Ragnarok, are both some of the MCU's best villains. That's actually probably one of the MCU's weaker components is the villains. But yeah, the Thor movies, at least the two recent ones, have done a good job of handling that. So yeah, I mean the movie had definitely some strong comedic bits, but it was a little tonally all over the place and wasn't quite as good as I hoped. But overall, it was an experience that I still had a good time with and something that I'm not going to hate on too much just because it's easily still better than those first two Thor movies.
Exactly. And this is the sixth movie in the stage 4 of the Marvel Universe now. And you and I were talking before the show, but I feel like there's no cohesion in the story of stage 4. Where we're going, I'm starting to kind of not care as much as I did. I mean, Marvel movies were events. The TV shows were events. And this was more like a side adventure story as opposed to something that was building. But coming off of Doctor Strange and the Eternals, I feel like I'm starting to kind of grow weary about Marvel. Outside of the Spider-Man movie, I feel like the storytelling is kind of lacking as opposed to where they've been for the past 10, 12 years. Curious what you think about where they're at right now, where the future of this Marvel storyline is going.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just think they're overproducing a lot of their content. We have like a lot of TV shows and movies coming out each year, and I think it's a lot for people to kind of keep track of. Not enough time to like generate hype. Like I feel like movies are kind of just like coming in. I didn't even realize.
Yeah, you're gonna have Ant-Man and the Wasp coming very soon.
Yeah, and it's just like there's no like time for people to like really get excited about these like new movies and stuff like that. And definitely a lot for people to keep up with, to keep understanding what's going on in the greater story.
You put up a barrier between new viewers pretty soon. The more you build everything on, it's tough to find an entry point into this franchise. Like I have to watch 130 hours of stuff to understand what's happening in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Exactly, yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's tough. All right, what did you end up giving Thor Love and Thunder?
I ended up giving it 3.5 stars myself. Like I said, there was still a lot of good bits in here, and I think a lot of it is me criticizing the movie because I know how good it can be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was still a fun outing at the movies. Definitely still recommend to watch, but nowhere near the best quality of what the movie could have been.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I ended up giving it 3 out of 5. It's fun enough. It's entertaining enough. It's a little uneven, and just didn't truly find the balance that I was looking for in this movie. But it's still fun enough. It's a Taika movie. Thor is a fun character right now, and It's unfortunately probably one of the better ones we've gotten recently. So you'll go check it out, as everyone is right now in the theaters. This movie is dominating the box office. Let's move on to our streaming spotlight this week, though. And our first one, we turn to Netflix for a film that you have for us. What are we talking about?
We're talking about The Sea Beast, this new Netflix original animated movie. The story follows Macy, a young girl living in this kind of historic town. There's like a kingdom with kings and queens, so it's definitely set in an older time period. She stows away this ship, Captain Cook's ship, who is also accompanied by one of his pristine sailors, Jacob. Macy and Jacob set out on an adventure after getting attacked by the sea beast itself. But they actually learn to end up understanding this creature and are going to take it back to their ship and their kingdom to kind of try to make a revelation about it and inspire change in the people of this kingdom.
Yeah. Feels really similar to some previous films I've seen before. Monsters are scary. We have to destroy what we don't understand. And a child discovers, no, they are, we just need to understand them better. Felt a lot like the How to Train Your Dragon storyline.
I would definitely agree. When I was watching, I'm just like, this is definitely How You to Train Your Dragon kind of
Which is great.
movie.
I love those movies. I think they're a strong franchise. Also, the director, Chris Williams, who, I mean, he's got some pelts on his wall by directing Big Hero 6, Moana, which just also had a little bit of Moana feel to me with Maisie, a seafaring adventure, but I enjoyed the animation on this movie. I thought that it was fun enough. The voice work was strong. Carl Urban is Jacob. I enjoyed him. And just that whole story of, we fear what we don't understand. We destroy what we fear. What that fear and what greed can lead people to do. And maybe sometimes you need to just open your eyes and discover something you don't realize, that maybe something that you think is scary isn't. There's also the whole dynamic of the other ship that is going to be sent out to be the big villain coming after them. I did appreciate that it didn't feel like uber cartoonish to me in a way that it didn't feel like this story was. I watched a chunk of this with my 9-year-old daughter. It didn't feel like it was talking down to kids. It felt like a lot like I felt with How to Train Your Dragon movies. Like, we're gonna make the best animated version of this story that we can on a Netflix budget. I appreciated that.
Yeah, that's a really solid thought there. These movies are always a little tricky for me because they're nowhere near bad, but it's almost borderline like generic, kind of like with new ideas. I mean, it's something like, I doubt I will remember this movie in like a few months, but like there's a lot of good things here, right? Like the story, like you said, is still captivating, and there's a lot of fun elements in here, definitely like with like the setting and the characters, but there's definitely a lot of parts of the movie is just kind of like weaker in regards to it just being a Netflix movie. Like the so-called villain ship that you mentioned has very little screen time.
Yeah, they introduced this massive galleon. We're gonna go out. It's got 1,000 cannons on it, and we'll deal with that later.
Yeah,
we'll get around to that.
And then of course, I guess the monster itself just kind of felt like a really generic design. Like there wasn't a whole lot.
That did surprise me. I agree with you. That did surprise me. I was expecting much more. And there's a point where they kind of go off to this island, and we meet another creature on the island that kind of befriends her, and we get some jokes with starfish and stuff like this. But I thought that all of those monster designs weren't anything that stood out to me. There's that yellow monster there that's kind of chasing them, and nothing really stood out as far as the design. Like, you have the dragons in How to Train Your Dragon. They're all very different, very wild looking, and very individual looking. And this one was kind of blah with that character design.
Of course, sometimes you get animated films that completely develop this whole world with all these species and their interactions. But this one, there was a solid 3-4 creatures, and they all just kind of had generic designs, solid colored,
They're all sea beasts.
Exactly. But again, there's some parts in here that I definitely enjoyed. I mean, for being a usually generic story, again, it's nowhere near bad. There's definitely like parts like when they're kind of go back into the kingdom and stuff like that, and they have to kind of like alert the people that like what they've been believing is wrong and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I like that part of the story quite a bit. Is the whole and the fact that Jacob, as like the pseudo hero in this movie, isn't always right. And there's a point in here where we're told like just being a hero doesn't mean you are always right. Being a hero doesn't mean you don't do bad, and that he isn't necessarily your perfect baby face good guy. But all right, let's go to what we gave the CB. Sir, I go to you. What did you give this film?
I gave this film 2.5 stars, right smack in the middle, just because I feel like it's nothing, too memorable or I guess special, something that I will ever look back on. But it also isn't bad, so just kind of like a halfway point.
That sounds fair. I believe I gave this movie 3 stars. TBD. Let's go. Yes, sir. Hey, let's call it 3 stars. I think is what I end up putting into my journal. But yeah, I'm with you. It's good. It's entertaining enough. It's another animated movie. But let's move on to something that's very different than the Sea Beast and the animated fare. We turn again to, I believe this was on Netflix as well, for a Taiwanese horror film called Incantation from director Kevin Ho. Stars Hussein Tsai as Ronan. She is a young woman who we focus on in this film. It is a found footage style film featuring a narration into the lens from Ronan. She is imploring the viewer to memorize an insignia that is on the screen and repeat an incantation that she says will bring blessings to her daughter and hopefully lift a curse from her. We cut back and forth through her life. I don't know if is this right? Yes, it is. We cut back and forth through her life as we are introduced to her years before as a ghost hunter, along with her boyfriend and his cousin. They broke a religious taboo in a remote village revolving around this deity that the folks in this village worship called the Buddha Mother, and a ceremony that it appeared to feature a sacrifice of a young girl, and this led to them ultimately basically desecrating a temple to the Buddha Mother, which, that's just going to release a curse. We all know that. And they explore this cave within, and the curse is unleashed, leading to Ronan's daughter, Dodo, developing a debilitating illness. She starts seeing like shadow people type things. The home becomes infested with things. And Ronan is desperate to save her daughter. She takes her to a priest and his wife who give her attempted exorcism with one rule, kind of like Gremlin style: do not feed her for 7 days. And of course, we're going to break that rule as Dodo is suffering. And this film, the film kind of spins into a kind of a rough horror film, all shot on shaky cam. There's a final sequence, kind of the final act of this film kind of really gives the audience more clues into the period of time that we've missed throughout this movie, but we also begin to realize that we have a very unreliable narrator who has been deceiving the audience in certain ways throughout this film. And the movie's really like Blair Witch-like. I don't know if you ever saw the original Blair Witch movie, which was the original found footage horror film. This felt very much like that, shaky cam.
Right, yeah.
Supposed to be found footage, whatever. And I'm not a fan of found footage, shaky cam movies. I don't know about you. You got any thoughts on like the paranormal activities of the world and such?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the way that it's shot isn't necessarily up my alley, but I guess the style of horror film I appreciate over like monster movie jump scares every 5 seconds.
Oh, there's nothing I hate more than the jump scares and the gore for gore's sake. It's nothing there.
I definitely prefer horror that makes me feel scared in a way that's not pop out at me, but like more like I guess like psychological. I have no idea what's going on, that
Start
kind of
creeping
thing.
me out.
Right? Yeah. Don't know what's gonna happen next. And I definitely think there was a good amount of that in this film. There was a lot of creepy visuals and almost in every single second in weariness about what's gonna happen next. Really enjoyed the relationship between Ronan and her daughter. That was probably my favorite part of the film.
Yeah.
A lot of the characters were good. It was kind of good to have, fun to see them like kind of change and like go on this quest to kind of find out answers throughout the movie. But there was definitely a lot of stuff that I almost thought was like unanswered in a way. Like we were kind of left with what really just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it reminded me a lot of a movie came out a few years ago called The Curse as well. Kind of borrowed some of those themes to me. It built tension, I think, really well. And I do appreciate, like you say, the jump scares. That's like one of my things that just drives me nuts, especially with these shaky cam movies. It feels like a cheat, and that's a lot of films really started to use it after Paranormal Activity got so successful. It just became just a cheat code for a lot of low-budget horror film directors. Like, we just shoot it as a shaky cam. It doesn't have to look good then, because we just say, oh, this is found footage, and then you can just like throw things into the screen and get the cheap jump scares. And I did appreciate that they didn't really go for that, especially when you're dealing with characters like going through tunnels where you could just have things fall constantly, and it really wasn't that. They kind of built the slow tension, which is kind of difficult actually to do as a filmmaker, as opposed to going for the cheap scares. Now, this film is on Netflix, and it's available in different versions. I'm curious, did you watch the Taiwanese version or the American dubbed version or the dubbed version with subtitles?
I did just watch the dub version just because that was what was already preset on my TV. I know that's always kind of a debate, like how you should probably do subtitles over just having it dubbed, because I do understand the argument where like a lot of the, I guess like emotion and like tonality of the voices doesn't really translate when it's just
you
like,
lose it in the performance.
Sure, and that's always unfortunate. But for me, I don't know, it's just kind of easier just to like listen to that, and it doesn't really affect anything for me. That's how I watched like TV shows like Squid Game and stuff. So.
I checked out the dubbed version. It wasn't bad. I actually watched a little bit of it, and then I went back. I was kind of going back and forth to see like how bad of a transfer it was. Sometimes you can tell. You can go, and it's like, I think they have the same person doing all the voices. You know, this one wasn't bad. I have one nitpick with this movie. I nitpick with a lot of these found footage movies is if you introduce a world where you have the narrator speaking into the camera, carrying a camera around, like explaining why we're watching it on like a home movie style thing, then you can't break away from that and give me like third person footage of that person doing things that you wouldn't be able to, the camera wouldn't necessarily see. And this movie kind of broke that rule several times, which
That's true, yeah.
It was one of my nitpicks. Like, but no, the camera wouldn't be able to get that angle of her doing this.
Yeah.
It's a nitpick for me. But it's over on Netflix. What did you end up giving Incantation, sir?
I believe I gave this film 3.5 stars as well. I wasn't necessarily blown away with this, but again, a lot of good elements here, and props for successfully creeping me out a bit.
That's good. Yeah, I believe I gave this film 3 stars right down the board. It's a 3-star day to me. But builds a decent amount of tension. It's enjoyable, kind of reminiscent of some previous films that we've gotten, but still fairly effective in my book. And it's just sitting over there on Netflix waiting for you. So if you are interested in it, it's so easy to check out. For our movie throwback this week, we bring back the movie throwback segment, and Jackson has selected a film for us to discuss. Go ahead, sir. What are we talking about this week?
This week's throwback film is The Commitments, originally recommended to me by a teacher. It follows Jimmy, a fresh out of college young adult who wants to form an R&B soul band right in his town of Dublin, Ireland. This movie shows like Jimmy putting together this band of anyone that he can find with musical talent who is also has the key and passion for soul as a medium. He puts together an 3-girl, like kind of, I guess, like track cat, like of singers. Finds a really talented trumpet player who is also really into the soul kind of style. But everyone else just kind of seems to be like people living in his town that are kind of close to him as friends and stuff like that. Playing in this band, and I have to say, like the performances of these classic soul songs are really well done. I really enjoyed how they kind of brought them to life, and they do definitely address points about how even though soul is usually a black style of singing, they definitely bring that to light about why they still want to sing it here. I think they hammered to the point how it's like music for the working man almost.
Absolutely.
So as the film progresses, tensions grow between the band as they get closer to their final big show, kind of as like the fame starts to get to them. So that is kind of the key turning point of the movie right there.
The rise and fall of a band. It's a classic story. This was, directed by Alan Parker, who's has a long history of making music films, biopics, and the such. Came out in 1991. I really enjoyed this film. I remember watching it when it came out, partially because the lead character's name is Jimmy Rabbit. Obviously, I have a similar name. I think it's a really interesting musical biopic about a fictional band, but really, you could kind of plug a lot of different groups have all kind of followed this. You know, you get big, somebody starts believing the hype a little too much, the band falls apart. Great performances. Andrew Strong as Deco, the lead singer, is great, and I'm amazed that he never really went on to do anything after this. He was 16 years old when he made this movie, with the voice of a guy who is double that at least, and really never did anything after that. One of the guys who I loved from this movie, though, Glenn Hansard, the actor who plays the guitarist with red curly hair, the guitarist, would go on to make one of my favorite movies of all time called Once, where he plays a busker out on the streets of Dublin playing songs, and it's like this love story. Went on to become a Broadway musical. It's great to see him as a very young man in this, and I'm like, oh, it's almost like the same character. We catch up to him years later. And the film feels legit. It feels like, to me, I'm inside a cramped Dublin pub with all these people and this soul music going. And I appreciate, with this rewatching it, that they didn't jam in like a villainous character. Nowadays, I feel like you make this movie, there's going to be a villainous music exec trying to screw them over.
Yeah.
There's going to be one of the parents who doesn't believe in them and is kind of sabotaging the band, a girlfriend who's sabotaging, something like that. And I appreciate that it wasn't that. It was just a story of this band Jimmy Rabbit trying to get these guys, inspire them to do this soul, and then their band kind of inspiring this little neighborhood to do something, be more than they are for a little while. And the music's great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate films where it kind of takes a culture and puts it in that setting. Like you said, you really do feel like you're just kind of in Ireland for the movie. The music, phenomenal, great performances kind of from everyone. Just how they kind of put everything together as a band. It is really impressive that some of these people never really went on to do anything else.
Yeah, most of them were kind of nobodies at the time, and only a couple of them really went on to do anything. It was really surprising. This was a big movie at the time.
Yeah. And there's some good elements of humor in here too.
Yeah,
Definitely some, especially in the argument scenes. There's some funny things, but I really kind of enjoyed a lot of the individual characters' stories as well.
Excellent, well, great recommendation, sir. I'm glad I got to rewatch this movie and talk about it for our throwback segment. Instead of looking back, let's look ahead, though, at what we have coming soon. I'm going to look ahead to the weekend of July 22nd. We have a few films coming out that weekend. First in theaters is Jordan Peele's newest film, Nope, which I am very excited about. We talked about it on our most anticipated list at the beginning of the year. Very excited for that. For our streaming films over on Amazon Prime, we have Anything's Possible, which is a romantic flick from Billy Porter about a young trans girl navigating her way through her senior year of high school. We also have a film called Prizefighter over on Prime, a biography of Jim Belcher, a 19th century boxer in England. This is led by Matt Hookings and Russell Crowe. And then lastly, a film, fittingly, a horror film over on Hulu set in Dublin called You Are Not My Mother, in a Dublin housing estate where a girl tries to unravel the mystery of her missing mother. Those are all the films that will be coming out, though, July 22nd. Before we go any further, though, we want to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters, The Palace here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for sponsoring this program. Always appreciate a comfortable dream lounger to go and watch these movies. We love our partnership with you. I also want to give a quick shout out to those who really enjoyed last week's video. We tapped into an audience over in India that I was amazed by. So if you're watching, just know we're going to have some more films for you as well, because it's been really interesting since last week's show. Next week, We're going to have films such as Where the Crawdads Sing, The Gray Man, Don't Make Me Go, Persuasion. We're also going to have some new hosts because I'm going to be on vacation finally next week. So there's going to be some new faces sitting here in these seats. Hopefully you enjoy. Jackson, before you go, thank you again for coming in.
It was a good time. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we can get you back in here sometime soon.
I'd love that.
All right. Well, until next week for Jackson, I'm Jamison.
I'm Jackson. I'm sorry.
Thanks for watching.